Hi everyone, I'm just getting ready to serve up this delicious French style cassoulet that I made today. It is a terrific, cozy, wonderful and warm dish. You basically can prep it all in one pot if you've got the right thing. If not, don't worry about it. I'm going to show you how to make it anyway. It's really flexible, so you can change things and alter things to kind of make it suit your individual tastes. And the best thing is you could make a pretty large amount of it and have enough for several meals. So that's less cooking for you in the long run. Hope you really love it. I'm going to love it right now while you watch the rest of the video. Yeah. Okay, let's get going with talking about some ingredients. And let me say this right off the bat. All of these ingredients are optional. This is what I love about cooking versus baking. If you don't like something, if you like more of something, less of something, it's way easier to make those adjustments and still get a stellar final result. Also, cassoulet is kind of the French peasant stew that has been elevated to an art form now. And you'll probably find as many recipes for cassoulet as there are French grandmothers. This is by no means the definitive recipe, and I don't think there is a definitive recipe because it will change by region, it will change by family, it might even change by person. Also, you'll find most of them will all have some kind of white bean and some sort of assortment of meats, usually either some kind of poultry or pork, usually some kind of sausage, but once again, depending on who you get that recipe from, it's going to be different. I have taken a lot of different recipes and tried them over the years and have kind of developed my own. Not to say it's better than any of those other recipes, but I've developed one to make it easier than a lot of those other recipes. Many call for ingredients that are hard to find or something that's a little more fussy. And I've tried to create this so that it's really easy for you to just open up your pantry and your refrigerator and throw it together, or go to the grocery store and buy things that are easy to find and not real expensive to buy. And it goes together a little bit more quickly than a more traditional recipe that kind of you're cooking it all day long. Okay, so let's get started with what I use in my recipe. So I start out with 3 cans, that's right, cans of beans. I like cannellini beans for this, but just to prove that I'm not lying when I say you could switch things up, I only have 2 cans of cannellini beans today, so I'm putting in 1 can of pinto beans. Next, 4 slices of thick cut bacon cut into strips about that size. If you don't have thick cut bacon, you could go ahead and use a thin cut. You might want to use a couple extra slices or 1 extra slice. If you don't typically buy bacon, you could omit it. I think it really helps make this recipe what it is. It adds that saltiness and smokiness, and there's not a lot of fat in this recipe. So actually that fat from the bacon really, I think, helps elevate this dish and make it seem like it's got more effort put into it than it really does. I have sliced sausages here. What I use for this is, you know, those packages you find in the supermarket of those bun-size sausages. A lot of them are, you know, some kind of apple sausage. Those are the ones I usually buy. You could buy full-size sausages and just slice it up whatever you want. the most important thing here is when you cut it, to cut it on an angle so you have this look. You know, because if you just cut it straight up and down, then you have franks and beans, but you cut it on an angle. Ooh la la, cassoulet. Okay, enough goofy. 1 to 2 pounds of chicken thighs. I like chicken thighs. They're much more juicy and flavorful than chicken breast. And I mean, that's just my personal preference and the cut I like. And you can cut these to whatever size you want. You could see what size I have cut mine to. Roughly, I cut each chicken thigh in about 4 pieces. If you are having people over and you want to serve this at the dinner table and have the whole fork and knife set up and wine and make it a whole fancy thing, I would leave the pieces of everything pretty big. Even the sausage, I would leave those, you know, more substantial chunks, and everyone could get like a beautiful piece of chicken and a nice piece of sausage within their bowl. But you know, for everyday eating, and especially if, you know, you're making a bigger batch than you need and you're going to have leftovers and warming those up, for me, it's just easier not to have to fiddle with a fork and knife, everything bite size, one bowl meal, easy prep, easy cleanup. That's how I like it. Okay, next, garlic. 4 to 6 average size cloves of garlic minced up pretty fine. So when I say average size clove, this is, you know, kind of a difficult thing to explain. I would say this clove is a little larger than average. This clove is, I don't even know where that came from, but that's one of the ones I had today. And this itty bitty clove, you'd probably need, I don't know, 10, 12. So, you know, use your best judgment here. If you think your cloves are super duper, I only used 2 today, even though I normally use 4 to 6, because mine were somewhere in between these 2 sizes, which is pretty big. Okay, 1 can diced tomatoes. 1 kind of roughly chopped to diced onion. That's an onion about this big. Let me talk to you for a second about onions. I know there are some people who are like, oh, I don't like onions, I'm gonna skip that. That's cool. I mean, if you don't like it, you don't like it. But I would encourage you to try it. If what you don't like about onions is that sharpness of the flavor that you get, you don't get that at all with this dish, because it cooks long enough that you don't really get that sense of it. And it really just mellows out and adds like a sweetness to this dish, and kind of brings a harmony, I guess, to the other flavors. If you're still worried about it, you can try just buying a sweet onion, which has even less of that sharpness, and trying that out first and seeing if you like it. Or, you know, don't add a whole one, add half of one. But it's up to you, but I think it really adds something and makes it really good. Okay, 1 to 2 dry bay leaves. I'm using all dry herbs today because I always have those in my house. 1 teaspoon of dry parsley and 1 teaspoon of dry thyme. If you don't have this, or if you're lucky enough to have an herb garden and you've got all your own fresh herbs, awesome. Go grab a couple sprigs of thyme, a couple sprigs of parsley, and a bay leaf or 2, and wrap those around each other and tie it up well with some kitchen twine. And you could just throw that in the pot while this is cooking, and it'll infuse all that flavor. And when you're done, just pull that out so it doesn't end up in someone's plate. Okay, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, ½ a cup of breadcrumbs. I use the panko breadcrumbs because they're a little chunkier and crunchier, but whatever breadcrumbs you have, if you have a different kind, that's fine. If you have seasoned breadcrumbs for this, that's fine. You could use those. This is a seasoned dish. And if you don't, and you just want to make your own, that's cool too. And if you don't have any, like I said, everything's optional. This just is going to be put on top to give it like a little crunchy crunch at the end. We're going to use some olive oil both for cooking and to top the breadcrumbs off. Last couple ingredients, a cup of chicken stock and 1 cup of wine. I'll be honest, I usually use red wine when I do this, but I happen to have this white wine open, and it's not my favorite one to drink, but you know, it's passable. But I figured might as well use it in this, and it's gonna be good. So I'll be right back to tell you all about the equipment we're gonna need today. This is it. This is what you are going to need to make this dish, which is one of the super beautiful things about it. If you've got the right pot, you only use 1 cooking vessel. How great is that? So you could use like one of these cast iron enameled Dutch ovens if you have that. Or you can use a regular old stainless pot that can go from stove to oven, preferably one that has a lid. I do have a lid for this one, I just didn't pull it out. So you could use this kind or this kind, any kind of good size pot that can go from stovetop to oven is good. But if you don't have that, all is not lost. You can just do all your stove work on a trusty frying pan, and then take just any old baking dish with a cover and cook it in that. You're going to want to make sure you have something that's the appropriate size. I'm not sure that this is, but it's kind of retro cool, so I pulled it out. Just as long as it's something that has a lid, or you could always just put some foil over the top if your baking dish does not have a lid. Okay, next we're going to go to the stove and start putting it together. Here's what I've done since I left the island. I've put my pan on the stove. Normally I would use my stainless steel Dutch oven for this, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. I also got a large bowl to put things in as I cook them. I have opened my can of tomatoes, and I have opened and drained my cans of beans. Not only do you need to drain them, but you need to rinse them. When you rinse them, you'll notice you might get some foaminess coming off of them. That's just them releasing some gas. So you know what they say, beans, beans, good for the heart. If you don't rinse them, you get the idea. Okay, so my pan has been heating for a little while. So I'm going to first add my bacon to the pan. And you just want to spread it around so it kind of cooks evenly. What you are waiting for is for most of this fat to be rendered off and have just tiny little bits of bacon left in the pan. Don't fuss with it too much, just let it go. At some point you're going to want to stir these and also turn them over so you get some even cooking. And before you know it, this will be done. And here we are. You can see it looks like there's a lot less bacon. And you can see how much fat has come off of there. This doesn't have to be super crispy like you might want to have it for breakfast, but you want it to have that beautiful brown color. So as soon as you have that, grab a slotted spoon, scoop it up, shake that excess fat off, and get that into your bowl. Oops, try not to spill any over the side like I just did. This is what happens when you're cooking and there's a tripod in your way. And I forgot to mention, I am cooking this at medium heat. There's no need for it to be too hot. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is brown my chicken right in that bacon fat. We're not going to leave this in a really long time. The idea is just to get some browning on the outside. You don't have to cook this all the way through. Be careful because this can splatter. Before you put your chicken in, you really should make sure you get all the excess water off of there. Just wipe it down with a paper towel and throw that paper towel out. You don't want to add more chicken than this because you don't want to crowd it. You want it to brown and kind of fry. You don't want it to start steaming itself in here. So just leave it on one side. You could keep checking it to see when it develops a nice kind of mahogany brown color. And once it does that, flip it, do the other side, and then as soon as it's done on both sides, put it back here in this bowl with your bacon and put the other pieces of chicken right into this pan. By the way, if your bacon wasn't really fatty and you don't have a lot of fat in this pan right now to brown that chicken, just go ahead and pour in some olive oil before you start the chicken going and give it a chance to really heat up. Then pop your chicken in there, it'll do the same job. If you have one of these screen guards, you can go ahead and place that on there. That just keeps you safer from having any oil come and spritz at you. Or you might even want to be careful. It probably isn't going to hurt you too bad if it spritzes you on the skin. You just want to watch your eyes, stay far away from it. If you have glasses, you could throw on your glasses or your sunglasses. Just something to keep this oil from getting you in the eye. See, there we go. Now it's at the right temperature. It's happening pretty quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of the chicken in here. So we're going to do the same thing with the sausages. Just get them a little bit brown. Okay, the sausage is now nice and brown. We're going to take that, add it to everything else that's been cooked up. For all these meats, the idea was just to get the outside browned quickly. But now we're going to do the onions and garlic in here. We don't want that to burn. And they will burn pretty quickly if we have it at a real high heat. So, I'm going to start with the onions. And just get those in there. Pour away from yourself so it doesn't splatter towards your face if there's going to be any splattering. And you are just going to stir this around and let this cook at a medium heat until these onions are looking a little golden. You'll see they start getting a little color right off from just the burnt on meat bits that are coming off of the bottom of your pan as you stir them around. But that's not what we're going for. We want them to be a little on the translucent side and soft. And bust up any big pieces that you have that are stuck together. And as soon as these start looking soft and translucent, it should take about 3 minutes. Depends on how big you cut your onions too, but that's a good estimate. So after you saute these around about 3 minutes, we're going to add our garlic, and we're just going to keep that in here for about 1 minute. Let me tell you what I did in the last few minutes. I got this whole thing ready and forgot to turn on the camera. Awesome job. Anyway, here's what I did. I put in all the things that I pre-cooked from the stove. Kind of flattened it out so it's a nice even surface, and poured in half a cup of my chicken stock and 1 cup, the full cup of my white wine. What we want is for the liquid to, so you can see the line of the liquid just below the surface. So you want a full kind of exposed surface of beans and sausage and chicken, but just below the surface is where you want that liquid line. Mind you, I kind of packed it in, so there's not that much space for liquid to go play underneath. If you are doing your whole thing in one pot, you do the same thing. You get it kind of all mixed together on the stove, kind of pat it down with a large wooden spoon or something, and then pour your liquids over it. And don't pour more than you need. You don't want it to look like these are underwater. Also, I know you might be thinking, that's a lot of cooking things individually on the stove. It's totally worth it. I've done it both ways, and it makes like a universe of difference in the final product. Also, some people just do their cassoulet stovetop, and they just, they do it in a big pot, and then they just let it cook there at a low temp for about half hour to an hour. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's still good. I think it gets better flavor if you move it to the oven. So that's what I'm going to do now. My oven is set at 350. This has already been in there for a couple minutes, but I digress. Put it in with the lid, and I will be back in 40 minutes to show you what happens next. So the next step is we are going to prep these breadcrumbs to make a lovely topping for our cassoulet. Now, for everybody else, this is still going to be in the oven when you're doing this part. So we're going to take our olive oil and add 1 tablespoon to this half a cup of breadcrumbs and stir it all up. You might want to use a bigger bowl. This is kind of ridiculous to try to stir in this teeny tiny bowl. And just, you want to get these breadcrumbs oily, because that is what's going to help them brown and get nice and crispy, which is the whole point of having them, really. Okay, so then you're going to open up your oven and take a look at your beautiful cassoulet, and then just sprinkle these all over the top. I mean, you can dump too. however works for you. You're going to be working in the oven. You're not going to be doing this leisurely on your counter like I am. So you could, find a way that is going to work for you to do it quickly so you don't lose a lot of heat, but also carefully so you don't burn yourself. Now this, you'll see, does not give you a really thick crumb coating. If you like a really hefty breadcrumby coating because you just want a lot of that crunch, double it up, triple it up if that's what you want. So anyway, after you do this, don't put the lid back on it. Back into the oven until your breadcrumbs are looking gold and crispy. And here it is. I'm gonna try to tilt it so you could see it without spilling anything out. You could see that those breadcrumbs are a beautiful golden brown color. Forgot to mention that you do want to boost the heat up to about 400 for the browning of the breadcrumbs. It just makes it happen a little more easily. Now that this is out of the oven, this is literally just out of the oven. It's looking really beautiful, golden. Don't forget, when you serve it, take a nice bowl, use a large spoon to serve it, and when you do that, try to get under it and place it into your bowl so that nice brown, dry, crispy breadcrumb stays right on top. Eat it and love it and enjoy it. Hope you have a lot of fun making it, and I'll see you soon. Bye.